You're taking a look inside Kansas politics. Welcome in. I'm Denisha Richard. In the weeks leading up to the election, our goal on Inside Kansas Politics is to help you know your vote. And today we have the man who supervises it all. Joining us is Republican Secretary of State Scott Schwab. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Denisha. I appreciate you having us in.
Well, you know, you're ready to do it all over again for another term.
It is, because there's some things we started that we want to say, hey, we not that we just started, that we finished. And we came into office, there's a lot of things that need to be updated, and they're not 2-year projects, 4-year projects, they're 5 and 6.
And you know, you talk about there's a lot to be done. Typically, the Secretary of State kind of flies under the radar, but it's been pretty busy for you. We've got the recounts, record turnout for voting. What was that like navigating all of that?
So it was stressful. I'll be honest with you. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, but it was redeeming. You know, we've been attacked. It started off on the coast, and all of a sudden people thought there was a problem with the integrity of Kansas elections, and it was really frustrating. But then, you know, and I feel bad for it, a gentleman was manipulated, put $118,000 on his personal credit card for a recount, and we recounted 61% of the ballots, and nothing changed. The winners were still winners, the losers were still losers. And it redeemed, because it's like, see, our poll workers get it right. There's not this hijinks from foreign nations that are switching equipment or massive fraud, and you know, there are folks that want me arrested for fraud, but they can't come up with a basis. It's just political irritability. But at the end of the day, really, our election workers were redeemed. They get it right, and we do have integrity of our elections in Kansas.
But did you think you would see anything like this during your term?
No. So when we campaigned, when we campaigned 4 years ago, we had all these law changes in elections, and we campaigned on, hey, let's just take a breath and be consistent. Let's not change things. Let's keep it the same for voters. And then what happens in our first presidential election, we have a pandemic. And so, you know, we have poll workers that are quitting. But the result is we had more poll workers apply and work than we've ever had before. Douglas County turned away 400 people that wanted to be poll workers because everybody stepped up to the challenge. And then we had the attack on the Capitol, and then all of a sudden people think, well, there's problems with elections in Kansas, but there was no evidence. It's like, you know, you're guilty to proven innocent. Well, we've been proven innocent.
Yeah, a lot to take in, and I want to also get into the privacy of voter information, and that's something that you have spoken about publicly before. You were actually the subject of lawsuits when it came to a software program that you modified that showed information for provisional ballots, but you seem to have backed that up by Tell me why. Why did you do that?
The reason why is because we use a vendor to manage our voter list. And some counties use that same vendor and that software platform for more things. So then we got open records requests for people's personal voter information, and it's partial information. And we've been fighting partial information and misinformation for 4 years. And so there was a political activist that wanted it and go door to door on people who had a provisional ballot and talk to them, which leave them alone. It's their business. It's between them. If they have a caretaker, maybe their caretaker. But whether or not they have a provisional ballot, it's between them and the county. Activists should not be engaging with them. The court said, well, that should be public. And the federal government says it's not, but the state court has interpreted that state statute says it should be. We'll work on that with the legislature next year because it's personal information, and we're trying to get rid of partial information, and it's not a full report. So what we wanted to do is say it's not information we need. We're just not going to generate it anymore. Well, the court ordered us to regenerate it, so we are doing that. But then we'll look to find a way to remedy that next year because we're always trying to protect the voters.
Let's talk a little bit about drop boxes. Yeah. You've also been very vocal on that. And so has your predecessor, Chris Kobach, who may possibly be your colleague after Election Day. So he says that he's against them. He wants to get rid of them. You say you don't understand why people are so against them. What are you doing now, and what do you plan to do to make sure Kansans understand why you think it's so important?
We've constantly explained it, and polling shows that they're overwhelmingly popular. And you can't get rid of them. What is that blue thing outside the post office? It's a drop box.
It's a drop box.
But if you put it in the county, it stays in our ballot custody hands with state workers. You put it in the blue drop box, it's now the federal government's control, and the post office is so messed up right now. Ever since the pandemic, we're having trouble getting, we have ballots that showed up in the mail a year late. And yes, I tell folks, if I owed you cash, would you want me to put it in the United States Post Office or just drop it at your house? Obviously, drop it off at the house. The other thing is a good example is down in Seward County, down in Liberal, Kansas. The post office is across the street from the clerk's office. You put it in the post office, it's going to go all the way to Santa Fe, New Mexico to hopefully show up across the street. Or you could put it in the drop box across the street that has 2 locks on it. It's handled by 2 Kansas poll workers at 2 different parties that obey and are subject to Kansas law and take an oath to make sure those ballots are processed through the correct chain of custody, as opposed to the post office treating it like a Bed Bath & Beyond coupon.
Well, are you ready to possibly go head-to-head with Kobach if you all are colleagues?
Well, I'm the head election official.
Right.
If he were to win this race, he would be the Attorney General. He would have to offer a lawsuit against me, and that's a conflict because he's also my attorney. So he could say he's against them, but there's nothing he can do. And it's county property. As Republicans, we don't take away other people's property without cause.
Well, I also want to talk about the Vote Anywhere law that was instituted back in 2019, which allows Kansans to basically vote at any polling place in their county.
Yes.
And there's been a bit of a delay in getting that going. It's 2022 and it still hasn't been implemented.
That's because the county didn't want to implement it. So we bent backwards to accommodate Sedgwick County so that they can implement that. It's incredibly expensive. When they passed the law, they gave the Secretary of State Rule and Reg authority. So now you're getting several vendors together that don't want to share secrets. And we invited the election clerk from Sedgwick County to help us write those rules and regs so they can be authored in a way the county could do it. And then when we went to publish them, we got sued by the Democrat Party, by a commissioner, that Republican commissioner down there, and the National Democrat Party. And so that stopped the whole process. We couldn't do anything till that litigation worked its course. The case was eventually dismissed. The court found we were right. And then we were able to finish the process on the rules and regs. And so just before we went to public hearing on those, I called the county commissioner, Dave Dennis, down in Sedgwick County, and said, we still have to do public hearing, but if you give me your plan, you can go forward for this year. And this is in 2021. I said, you can do it this year, but give me your plan.
Okay.
Because the public hearing is not going to change the rule and regs, and nobody showed up for that portion of the public hearing anyway. He called me back 2 weeks later and said, the clerk never wrote one. If you don't write the plan, you can't go forward according to the rules and regs that she herself helped us write. Now Sedgwick County was looking at doing it for next year, but when they look at it, the backup plan is so expensive, it may not be worth it, because what they were going to do is use an encrypted cell network so that if you voted here, all the other polling places know you voted, so you couldn't double vote. What happens if there's a cell network outage? It's not like you can come back the next day and vote. Election day is election day. So what would happen is you would have to be able to print off a ballot on demand for that single voter until that network comes back up. That's incredibly challenging.
You have multiple priorities, not only election integrity and security,
Right.
you also want to allow election workers to do their jobs better, make ways to make their jobs better. Tell me more about those priorities.
A lot of those priorities we did accomplish in this term, and we've got our legislative agenda, and most of our election security stuff's on the back end, so it doesn't affect voters. They don't know the security we're doing, and we want them to have a pleasant voting experience. We did hire an election trainer and security official that goes from county to county, and she's nationally recognized for what her knowledge base is, and she's helping us get the counties just tightened up better, because again, nobody goes to college to study elections. These are volunteers, and she's going to help train and say, here's how you secure your equipment, here's how you should follow chain of custody. So we launched that for this election. It's going great. Our biggest priority is actually in the business division. So true story, and I'll try to make this as quick as I can. I was having lunch with former Secretaries of State Jack Breyer and Ron Thornburg, and we were the first state, he was telling me, to use computers to actually provide tabulation results for elections. Before it was on a chalkboard, and you'd go to the courthouse and you'd look at what they had to write, and you'd write it down on your pad, get on a payphone, and call it in. So what he did was said, we're going to start using computers, and we're going to charge the press access to the computer, and we'll sequester the results for 10 minutes so they can get it up there, and it'll help fund the agency. And that's what happened for several years. Ron Thornburg had to run a cable out of the second floor of the Capitol, down through the rotunda, through the basement, in the tunnel, up to docking to transportation. They had the same computer system. And IBM CEO was in the Capitol that day in case anything went wrong. We're still on that computer system for our business division. We campaigned 4 years ago that we wanted a business one-stop. If you're going to do a restaurant, you got to file your LLC with us. Then you got to go to Ag to get your restaurant permit. If you have a bar in there, you have to go to Revenue to get your liquor permit. If you have employees, you got to go to Labor. If you want help from Commerce, there's another silo. You get to type in that information. We're creating a business one-stop that you just fill out the wizard, and when you click send, those permits just come to you. You're done. You don't have to go to the other silos. But I got to get off this computer system, and it's like going from Tandy, Radio Shack, TRS-80 computer to an iPhone 14. And we've been criticized we didn't do it in 4 years. We didn't get there in 4 years to go from that Radio Shack computer to an iPhone 14, but we're going to be able to do this in around 5 years, which is why we're running for re-election. And West Virginia already does this, a state that can't even beat a Kansas football team, I might add. And
we're good at football.
Right, but they use a Kansas software company to drive it. So we really want to get this going, but the number one priority was getting off a computer system that our predecessors never made the priority to advance. So we are using technology so that we can make it easier to do business in Kansas. All
right, you've got a long checklist there. Thank you for joining us. What does the Kansas Supreme Court Justice retention vote really mean? And is it the next battleground for abortion rights? We talk about it coming up next.
Dear road rivals, cheer up, wannabe twinsies. If you try harder, maybe you can catch up. Later, Toyota.
Existing current Toyota owners or lessees can get up to $1,000 loyalty cash on the purchase or lease of a new 2022 Toyota. Toyota, let's go places.
We all learned something very important during the pandemic. We learned just how connected we are, that we need each other, that we are strongest when we work together, live together, hope together. And we learned that we need each other to be healthy. Vaccines, including the COVID vaccine, are an essential way to ensure that we all stay healthy for our own good and for the good of our families and communities. Call 785-861-8800 today for your vaccination appointment with Grace Med, the home of hope care for everyone.
27 News has your morning news covered.
Good morning, Northeast Kansas, and thank you for joining us.
Working for you, keeping you up to date on overnight news and developing stories. 27 News, where top newsmakers break stories and where you can get your start the day forecast.
Here's a look at what you can expect for temperatures later on today.
Join Tiffany Littler and meteorologist Becky Taylor weekday mornings for 27 News, working for you.
Monday, it's
Halloween!
And we get very scary and very strange.
What are you looking at? What?
It's Live's Multiverse Halloween show.
Help us!
With surprises.
Hey, Kel, what's...
And over 70 costumes. Live's Multiverse Halloween show.
Nicely done.
Monday at 11 on 27 KSNT.
Dear road rivals, cheer up, wannabe twinsies. If you try harder, maybe you can catch up. Later, Toyota.
Existing current Toyota owners or lessees can get up to $1,000 loyalty cash on the purchase or lease of a new 2022 Toyota. Toyota, let's go places.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. The vote for abortion rights, that has long passed in Kansas, but the topic is still quite the huge debate. And now that Kansans have spoken, some believe there is a new battleground in the fight for abortion rights. Kansas Supreme Court judges, and so many questions linger. And to help us out a little bit, we have two experts here with us today. We have both Amy Castle and Josh Nye. Thank you guys for joining us. Now, let's go ahead and talk about what's going on here today. A lot to unpack. When you think about it, there hasn't been a Supreme Court justice that has been voted out in over 60 years. That's decades, but there still has been some campaigns that have attempted to oust these judges. Amy, I'm going to ask you, do you know of any of those campaigns? What have we seen in the past?
So not too long ago, around 2016, there was a campaign to vote to not retain Kansas Supreme Court justices, and it was in reaction to a specific case that the Kansas Supreme Court decided that ultimately went up to the Supreme Court of the United States. But what happened was an effort, a campaign to publicize, to vote out certain judges because of the way they voted on that case. That campaign wasn't successful, but it was one of the closer retention races. Usually our retention races are usually 30% vote them out, 70% vote to retain. That particular race was closer for some of the justices than we normally see. But as a general rule, we usually vote to retain our Supreme Court justices.
Basically, this has been everywhere, this retention vote. And Supreme Court Justice Melissa Standridge, she recently said that lines are becoming too blurred, that people are blurring the lines of politics and law. They're two different things, according to her. She says that politicians, they work for the people. Supreme Court justices, they work for the law. And she says that I think what's being understood is that this retention vote is kind of becoming politicized. And so the question is, do you think these judges are influenced by politics?
Well, for the most part, they're not. They are following the law. That's their job. Their job is to read laws, interpret laws, apply those laws to the facts of the case. The problem, though, is that when you have a system where a judge is worried about the next election, right? Am I going to be elected in 2 years? And if there's a particular case, a hot button case, right? Well, in order to maintain their position as a judge, well, that might influence their vote on a particular case, right? And so, for example, in the federal system, right, lifetime tenure. I was a federal law clerk for 3 judges for 8 years. I never had to think about politics, right? Because my judge was going to be on the bench no matter what, right? My judge wasn't worried about the next election. My concern is when you have judges who are concerned about the next election, how that might actually influence their decision if they want to keep their job. They might decide a case in a way that pleases 51% of Kansans or 51% of the state Senate.
Okay, we're going to hear from Josh when we return. We're going to take a quick break and we'll talk a little bit more about this.
At the Mattress Hub, we believe that healthy sleep has the power to change the way you live.
Find huge savings on the best brands in sleep. Change the way you sleep with Tempur-Pedic and Purple Mattress with instant savings and no interest financing up to 60 months. Only at the Mattress Hub.
As Americans, we enjoy many freedoms: life, liberty, and the pursuit of good beer. Not all beers fulfill the lofty expectations on which our founding fathers built this country. As Americans, we remain free to drink any beer we choose. The Blind Tiger Brewery urges you to come in and try one of the principles that keeps us free. Blind Tiger Beer, simply American. This is Jay with the Blind Tiger Brewery, and I approve all craft beer, especially ours.
Watch KCN Zone for your VIP, all-access coverage of your team.
Friday nights at 10 on Fox 43 KTMJ. Sponsored by DraftKings, Manhattan Area Technical College, and Farview Farms.
This has never been done before.
3 artists are going to perform, and we can only choose one.
This is a very tough decision.
I quit.
It's been a great run.
You broke me. I quit.
You are Father Davenport. You are here to perform an exorcism.
This is not real. There's a scientific explanation for what's happening. Hell no.
I just got an urgent case. We're essentially stealing an aircraft.
It's a simple task for someone with your training and experience.
You two will most likely do something that results in laws getting broken.
Don't worry, we got this. Teamwork makes the dream work, baby.
Last week, it's a gunshot. This week, it's a plane crash. What's next? You're really enjoying this, aren't you?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Sundays at 11:30 on 27 KSNT.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. We are talking about the retention vote in the Kansas Supreme Court judges. We just talked to Amy about whether or not we think that judges are politically influenced. Josh, I want to hear what you think about that.
Sure. I think that what we're really talking about is the idea of judicial independence that goes back prior to the Federalist Papers being debated as to how judges should be selected in our federal Constitution back in 1787. Judicial independence is certainly something we value in our tradition, in our jurisprudential tradition, and it's something that we strive for. And each selection system seems to claim that they can ensure things like merit or things like independence of mind or taking politics out of the courtroom, that type of deal. But I think that we confuse categories when we say that are judges influenced by politics, by their fear of not being retained or elected or something like that, or are they influenced by particular ideologies? And I think that we certainly can see at the federal level and the state level that there's a conservative jurisprudence and there's a liberal jurisprudence, and we really can start to predict how things are going to come down. And so when we talk about judicial selection processes, the retention aspect of that really is a nod of the hat towards the fact that the custodians of the law in Kansas are not judges, they're not legislators, and it's not the governor, it's the people.
This has been touted as the next abortion battleground. Retain this judge, recall this judge, retain so-and-so, get this one out. Is this really the next abortion battleground, these judges that are sitting on this bench? Amy, what do you think?
It shouldn't be, because the voters spoke on August 2nd. The voters spoke and said that we Kansans want access to abortion care. We have a constitutional right to bodily autonomy, and so the Kansans has spoken on this. So the issue should be done, but it ain't, right? It's not, and there are so. You know, it all goes back to a particular decision that the Kansas Supreme Court made in 2019, Hodes and Nassar versus Derek Schmidt, and that is the case in which the Kansas Supreme Court found that women have a constitutional right to bodily autonomy, a constitutional right to access abortion care. So it was literally the next day when, you know, Republicans were like, we're going to, you know, vote out the justices who signed on to that opinion. So that's, I haven't seen a concerted effort. I haven't seen a lot of money, but you can find which judges voted in the Hodes decision, and so I think it is a potential battleground, and there's all the candidates for whom you're voting is a battleground for abortion rights.
Josh, do you agree?
Well, one thing to keep in mind is this is not the Hodes court. We have 3 new justices that weren't on the court when Hodes was decided in 2019. One of the justices that was on the court wrote almost 90-page dissenting. This was a 6-to-1 decision. I think what Kansans voted on August 2nd was really a civics question. Ultimately, whether they were going to directly overturn Hodes in the context of what law was at issue. What remains to be seen is if we see more lawsuits from the New York Center for Reproductive Rights come into Kansas and try to challenge different laws that have been on the books for 20, 30 years to take wholesale all of those laws down at one time. I think that Kansans really were told, at least by a lot of the advocates against the constitutional amendment, that we have reasonable regulations on the books. We have things like 24-hour waiting periods. We have things like health and safety regulations, stuff like that. This is a reasonable state. Kansas would like to think of themselves as a Midwest reasonable state. The question will be brought back to them once these laws start falling one by one if they're challenged in court. And I think that at that point, the question will be different than it was on August 2nd.
All right, so many good opinions here. Thank you guys both for your expertise. A local community leader wants to promote the vote with a song. Hear his words straight ahead.
What happens here matters here. That's why the 27 News Capital Bureau brings the important stories home to you like no one else can.
Let's go live to the State House.
Here's Capitol Bureau reporter Denisha Richard.
It's been a long road, but the governor has finally signed the bill into law today.
Because decisions made here impact you, your family, and your home. We have your Capitol News covered.
Right now, there's a big political divide on this issue.
The 27 News Capital Bureau, working for you.
This has never been done before.
3 artists are going to perform, and we can only choose one.
This is a very tough decision.
I quit. It's been a great run.
You broke me. I quit.
You are Father Davenport. You were here to perform an exorcism.
This is not real. There's a scientific explanation for what's happening. Hell no.
This is a fish. A clownfish, actually. He lives in a reef like this, in an ocean like this. This ocean contains these currents. These currents help carry fishing boats like these. Fishing boats like these bring their catch to port. Their catch is loaded onto this truck and delivered to this restaurant. This restaurant serves dinner to this family. This family drives back to their home. Their home borders this forest. This forest surrounds this creek. This creek trickles into this river down to these mangroves. These mangroves buffer the coastline from this bay. This bay is a hunting ground for this shark. This shark swims out to this ocean. This ocean flows over this reef. This reef is home to this fish. This is a fish, a clownfish actually.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. Well, we hear it all the time. Get out to vote. But this local rapper put a bit of a creative touch to get voters out to the polls. Joining me is SJ Hazim. SJ, you said it plain and simple. You're here to promote the vote.
Promoting voting is what we do. You know, it's really, you have to speak the obvious to people, because a lot of times people wonder why people don't show up to their events, they don't show up to shows, they don't show up to volunteer. Well, they're waiting to be asked. So I'm going to ask them.
And you're not only going to ask them, you're going to rap to them.
You know, I wanted to put it in a way because you have to be creative in order to get engagement. You know, it just doesn't come haphazardly. So, yeah, I put a little something together, and I'm really excited about sharing it with you guys. So.
All right. So SJ Hazim's promoting the vote by rapping. You got to vote. Take it away, SJ.
This is not a flex, I'm just telling you what's next, But I do not promote who to choose in the polls, but you got to vote. I hear people talk about this, talk about that, but without action it's all cap. People claim they ain't sleep while they taking a nap, and they choose not to vote. As a matter of fact, that's why I'm here today. You should check their resume and make sure you go and vote on November 8th. You can choose a dark horse who is in the back. Vote Republican or you can vote Democrat. Your voice, your choice, you gotta make one. People die for voting rights, don't forsake them. I ain't here to tell you who to choose, that's up to you. But make sure you hit the polls in 2022. But I do not promote who to choose in the polls, but you got to vote. Hey, I do not promote who to choose in the polls, but you got to vote. I hear people talk about this, talk about that, but without action, it's all cap. People claim they ain't sleep while they taking a nap, and don't VOTE. As a matter of fact, that's why I'm here today, guys. Get out and vote.
Yes, get out and vote, SJ. You said it the best way. Thank you so much for that excellent performance. Let's go and do the vote dance. Vote, vote, vote. That was your look inside Kansas politics. Of course, we will see you next week, same time, same place. See you next Sunday.